It can be quite overwhelming to get started on the visual design of a new project. You want it to look so good, but just sometimes the first thing you put down is just not good. And I still struggle with this, even when I get started with a brand new project. You have all those hopes and dreams and ambitions of just creating the most beautiful design you've ever seen, but just oftentimes just you're hit with blank canvas syndrome and you don't like the way things look. So it can be a bit of an emotional experience to try really hard to make good design and have a strong opinion that's just coming up short over and over. And sometimes good design can be subjective if you aren't fully aware of the full project's landscape. You know, all the things that are involved, including but not limited to the team, stakeholders, the brand, the desired look and feel. So if you just start from scratch with a blank canvas without doing any research or any searching for reference material or asking questions about what it should look like, you're going to find yourself kind of trapped in a corner. This is an easy to follow process that sets you up for success from the very beginning. It arms you with the necessary information to make good design decisions on behalf of everyone involved. So there's 4 basic steps to this, and the first one is ask questions. Ask lots of questions about the task that you are solving with design. Anything that you can't confidently explain to someone else about the project you're designing for, you're not going to be very well equipped to tackle those design challenges until you're able to do that. It's your job to fully understand and to know what assumptions you're making before you design anything. So make sure that you ask lots of questions. You also need to know who the stakeholders are. And that's just a fancy term for anyone who has skin in the game. So the CEO, project manager, creative director, is it a client? Is it one of your teammates? Anyone that might have an opinion on the design and might have any influence on the outcome of the project. You also need to know who makes the final call. Do all of the stakeholders agree on the specific problem they're trying to solve? And does everyone's opinion factor into the final decision? Or is there one person that says, yes, we're going with this? Now, a lot of times you will have to present to a group or present to multiple people, but it's really important to know who has the final decision and who among the team has a really strong opinion about the design. And it's your job to kind of pull that out of people during the initial discovery meetings and ask, are there any colors that are off limits? Is there anything that is done now that you would like to see done differently in the future? You know, just ask those questions. Ask as many questions as you possibly can and try to saturate your brain with all of those problems and all of those opinions that are a part of the team's perspective. That way you can be fully armed when you're going into that blank canvas. You have a lot to work with and a lot to stay away from based on all of that research that you've done up front. Number 2 is going to be determining design direction. Assuming you've got most of your questions answered, you can start thinking about the design direction for the project. This is going to include, what have you learned so far that can help you choose a typeface or a typeface style? Do you need something ornate with serifs? Or do you need something big and impactful, or maybe a friendly geometric sans serif? You know, research the different typefaces that there are, the different type styles, and see what kind of adjectives that they evoke. And is it a part of that direction that you discovered in those initial questions? Or even your own personal opinion. Is this a type of project that would really benefit from really big, bold typography? Or is this a project that would benefit from a script, or just whatever those questions that you might ask yourself about the typography? A lot of times choosing typography is going to set the tone for the entire project. So it's good to experiment with a range. It can be 3 typefaces, it can be 20. But when you get ready to present some options, limit it down to 3 or 4 different typefaces, ones that you would be excited about using, and kind of maybe you mock up 4 different versions of that in 4 different typefaces. The same design in 4 different typefaces can all look really different. Number 3 is going to be focusing on components instead of the entire design. So if you're designing a marketing website, for example, you might focus on just designing the navigation and the header background. Maybe you design what maybe a little image and title and body copy lockup might look like. What might the video thumbnails look like? Will the play button be in the middle or on the bottom right? What kind of color scheme would be if it was like a full background color footer? all these individual items you can design kind of in abstract to get kind of a look and feel for the way that certain treatments might look. And you can present that in abstract. So it's not like, no, I don't like the home page, or no, I don't like the way that interior page looks. It's really about, starting those conversations. And that leads me to number 4, have conversations over presentations. Now, you are going to have some type of design presentations, but if you can lead the client or the teammates into more of a conversation about the design versus a giant presentation where you haven't seen anything, you don't know anything, but here it is, I'm unveiling my beautiful design, and now you can react to it. That's not really the best way to present the designs, and that's not really the best way to get started on your designs either. So if you can have your design experiments and the components that you're kind of weaving together, if you can present those in a way and you can set the expectations that you're saying, okay, look, we're going to have a conversation about this. There's not really anything to approve. There's not really anything to give the green light to. I'm just exploring a few different options. Here's something that looks like, friendly. Here's something that looks this way. I'm experimenting with the different colors. I just kind of want to get your reaction to the way some of this is feeling. If there's any that just are completely like, no, I don't like it at all, let me know. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I've just designed a couple of different examples for different directions or styles that we can take. Or maybe the thing that you've designed is really focused on one direction and you just want to kind of get a response. Like, this isn't the design. This is not the final design. This is just a possibility of where it could lead. So I just want to get your gut feel on how you would imagine. How would you feel if this is kind of the form that things started taking? So you're just getting little tiny buy-in with a conversation about the design versus, oh my gosh, I spent 3 weeks designing this homepage. I hope you like it. Fingers crossed, big unveil. So I like to present early and often and just slide in those conversations maybe once or twice, sometimes 3 times a week, depending on the size of the team or the project. But those are the 4 steps. So let's dive into some examples of how I've done that in some of my projects and hopefully how that can equip you to work for yours. So I've shown this FiberStream project before. This is the final website that we ended up building. And now I want to show you the sketch files that I actually used to show the kind of first off kind of element collage, user interface component map for the first presentation. So this was actually what the website looked like when they contacted me to redesign it for them. They had this FiberStream logo with kind of this white swoosh through it. And we had lots of conversations about this project. And I even gave them a keynote presentation of other websites that I copied and pasted and said, here's the, Nike.com website. Here's Adidas.com. Here are a few other examples of different types of site. And I'm trying to get a reaction. Like, what are you kind of leaning towards here? Because here are my thoughts. Here's where I'm thinking we could take this. What do you think about that? And so we settled on kind of early on, like, what if we created the Nike of internet service providers or the Adidas of internet service providers and kind of give it that performance brand kind of feel. And so this is what they had, and they agreed on that direction. And so I actually started off by experimenting with this font called Avant-Garde, which is actually the same exact font that the Adidas typeface is set in. So if you take the lowercase and you do Adidas, then there you go. That's the Adidas logo right there. So right off the bat with the typography, I'm trying to evoke that Adidas feel, like this black and white and these big letter forms. And I'm even attempting to kind of redo their logo because I think this could use a lot of work. It could be a lot more simple. Think about the Nike check or just that simple Adidas word mark. So I'm just exploring, what if their logo looks something like this? Or what if we could shorten it? What if we had their packages where there was a giant number? What if we use these little arrows? I'm really just designing random elements and I'm looking at different color combinations, logo combinations. I'm pulling in some reference material for like big search fields. I'm even playing around with like a possible little header, like a little navigation header, maybe a rollover state, playing around with some random advertising looking like modules where we have this huge text And I'm really using what they already had as their packages. And some of this information, I'm looking at all these building photos. And so this was one of the first rounds where I showed all of these different options. I tidied it up a little bit from this part. Basically, I took all of this and then I put it into a little bit more of a tidy version where I took all of my favorite elements and I kind of cleaned it up a bit. And so I'm just showing the possibility of doing these big call outs, big different internet package options. You know, you could tell this could technically be a part of a website, but all in all, this is not a singular website. These are just a bunch of little pieces of a possible website. And that makes it a little bit more stress-free, knowing that you're not really locking into a final design of a big website. You're just throwing stuff around, you're having fun. I'm not creating components. I'm not worried about accidentally using a black versus a charcoal, or really, I'm not trying to track all of my gray colors. I'm just really just having fun, exploring, no stress. This is not the website. I'm just drawing little pictures of what it could possibly look like with an informed direction, knowing that it needs to have this kind of fun performance kind of feel. I knew that a black and white kind of stark, simplistic color scheme would look really nice. And they have the orange as their existing brand color. So I know that I can punch that in. So now I'm just looking for typefaces and type treatments and ways to handle little different components. And that's really what this is a playground for trying to figure out, what if we have something that looks like this? Maybe this is the rollover. What if we create like a fun grid of different buildings that have been upgraded? And I'm also trying to provide a few different typography options here. So we've got Source Sans body copy with avant-garde headline, or maybe we use avant-garde for everything. Or maybe we try this action condensed headline, which could also be kind of sporty. And so eventually we settled on this, and we settled on this kind of big in your face kind of treatment. And then eventually that culminated into something that looked something like this. Now we did end up changing a lot of this stuff out. It wasn't fully final. And I think we also ended up putting this on the right side instead of like down below. But a lot of this emerged from those experiments and from having those conversations. This particular client had a very strong sense of what he liked and what he didn't like. And that's sometimes that can be tricky to have someone who's really opinionated, but if you're able to get in at the very beginning and have them become a part of the design process, then you can win them over. And it's not like you're not tricking them, you're just making them a part of the design process. And you are leading them through that process, which can be very messy, especially if you go 2, 3, 4 weeks without showing any design. Then you can slowly build trust, and you're making decisions along the way and checking in. And it all starts with those no stress design experiments. Here's another example from a long time ago. I worked on a project for the Dr. Phillips Center in Florida. This is kind of a possibility of a header of the way the website could look. So I'm bringing in some of the imagery that they already had. They also had a pretty strong brand guidelines that they were working with. So they already had some of their typefaces that they wanted you to use. So I'm using their typeface, but I'm showing maybe this could be, 2 different shows on mobile. Maybe we bring in a grid of attendees on here. Maybe the navigation looks like this across larger screens, medium screens, smaller screens. And maybe we bring in this pattern for the rollover. So again, just exploring. It's not a huge stressful endeavor. I'm just throwing things around, trying to make it look good. Maybe this is a block quote with their pattern back here, showing more possible rollovers, more possible form fields or search displays. A lot of this didn't even make it necessarily into the final product, but it kind of just gives that feeling of what's possible. What could this possibly look like? And you might find yourself with a client or a team member that's just kind of nodding like, yeah, I can see this totally working. Like maybe not this, but definitely that. And you kind of by process of elimination get yourself, you're trying to find your way along the direction. You yourself are trying to get from point A to point B, and you're trying to figure out where to lock in. And then once you get those conversations, sometimes it only takes one conversation, sometimes it might take 2 or 3, maybe multiple. But once you finally get it locked in, then you can exploit all of those designs that you've been experimenting with. And when you find something that really works, you can really start to exploit that design decision and turn it into that full-fledged project. Here's another example of a project that I worked on called 12 Stone. Again, I'm just bringing in a big navigation, the possibility of overlaying the typography on the image, playing around with different background colors for the buttons, maybe button shapes, and really just trying to draw out some conversation, whether it's about the typography or the treatment of the header. Maybe we have these overlapping panels. You know, this is not a full website, but we're trying to just kind of mock up. Okay, maybe this is what it looks like on a horizontal type of a layout. Maybe this is what it could expand into on mobile. And maybe these are some of the colors. So just kind of playing around with patterns and overlays and these drop shadows. And this actually ended up being something that they were really into. So we brought this as a big part of the final project. But then even, bringing some of that into the background of the possible mobile navigation screens. Okay, we've got our unauthenticated version. We've got our authenticated version. Maybe this is what it looks like when you expand search, and then kind of popping that into different fields on the mobile devices. So really, you're just kind of painting this picture of what could be. Not this is it. You're painting this picture of what could be, and you're starting those conversations instead of having a big presentation. So for your no stress design experiment homework, I want you to design a small concept for someone that's like a dream client of yours, and do your best to answer all of those no stress process questions. Like, I know you can't ask questions from your dream client unless you happen to have a friend working there. So you'll have to make some assumptions and educated guesses because you won't have all that information and that data, but you can use some of their past projects as some indicators for, okay, they use these colors, they use these typefaces. So how could I interpret that into like maybe a marketing campaign for them, or a mobile app? Maybe it's a utility mobile app based off of their brand. Just something fun that you're really excited about that could be really impactful. And secondly, determine the design direction. Is it going to be kind of exactly existing from something that already is out there, or will you take a different twist on it and integrate some new concepts for this particular project? And then focus primarily on just some key components. You don't have to design a full app or a full website. Just design the possibility of what that could be. Maybe it's a header, the navigation. I've got links to some of those examples that I showed previously in the video. So just pick out those fun little components that could kind of start to paint the picture of what could be. Now, later on, if you wanted to turn it into something a little bit more fully fleshed out, that's totally fine. But for right now, just keep it loose and don't worry about components. Don't worry about naming layers unless you just want to keep yourself a little bit organized. And then once you're done, write out a paragraph or two that explains the decisions based on the information that you gathered in steps 1 through 3. Like, what adjectives are you trying to evoke with the design? And what are some of the key components that you've designed out? And what are some of the assumptions that you've made about the typography and the color based on some of the reference material that you saw from the existing websites or apps? If you've never written out your design decisions like this, it can be challenging, but don't let that stop you. Just lean into that uncomfort, because this is going to be a huge part of selling your designs to your clients, to your teammates, internally, wherever you're at. You're going to need to be able to articulate those design decisions into some form of communication. And some of these no stress design experiments are the perfect place to do that. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with.